Well, hey there, welcome to Redeemer Online Church. My name is Corey, and I'm one of the pastors on staff here. You know, it's our mission to help the physically scattered to digitally gather together and grow as disciples of Jesus, to help you become a follower of Jesus. And if that's something you're interested in and you haven't done so yet, we really want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button, the like button, and that notification bell down below, because that's going to let you know whenever we put out new videos, and it's going to let us know that you're here. And let me tell you, we are so glad that you're here. And more than anything, we don't want this to just be a one-way conversation from us to you, from my mouth to your ears, but we want to have a two-way conversation. So I'd love for you to reach out on any of the social media platforms, Instagram or even Discord, and we can connect there. That'd be wonderful. Now, right now, we're going to jump back into the conversation we're having called habits, where we're talking about the most important rhythms of a healthy Jesus follower. So let's get back into it. Well, welcome back to our conversation that we're calling Habits, the 5 rhythms of a healthy Jesus follower. And I'll tell you up front, the whole point of this series is to answer the question, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus now, in this cultural moment, in the mid or post-pandemic world where so many of our natural rhythms have been disrupted? I think we're getting this chance for a religious reset, to re-examine the things that matter most. And so far, we've talked about 3 out of the 5 habits, to gather, to grow, and to give. And let me tell you, if Christians, if Jesus followers would drop all of those habits and all other habits and just focus on the one we're going to talk about today, I think it could change the world. But I know that if you focused on this one in your life, it would change your world. Now, a little while back, I attended this conference for nonprofit leaders. It was hosted by a guy named Jeff. Now, Jeff's an incredibly impressive person. He leads this local nonprofit that has multiple locations, serves thousands of people with a bunch of different needs in his city. More impressive than what the organization is today is what it looked like 20 years ago. Jeff started it with just a handful of people in a rented space. And for over a decade, he was getting no traction at all. I mean, things just weren't happening. But from those humble beginnings came this huge organization that serves so many people in his city. Now, even if you're not into the church world or nonprofit, or you don't care for that kind of thing, I think anytime you hear the story of somebody who started something, maybe a business or a neighborhood program or a sports league, whenever somebody starts something from nothing and then grows it into something large, I mean, we're naturally impressed by those kinds of people, right? I know I am. But what Jeff built is not what impressed me most as I attended that conference. No, it was something that happened in between the sessions. You see, after grabbing a snack and sucking back a quick coffee, I headed to the bathroom after it seemed like everybody else had finished and there were no more lineups. I went into the bathroom and there was Jeff. He was wiping up the counters in the restroom so that they'd be fresh and clean for the next wave of people after the current session. Huge nonprofit leader, pastor, serving and speaking to thousands, hosting this conference. That same Jeff had his sleeves rolled up and he was wiping down the bathroom. Have you ever had that experience? Have you ever caught somebody doing a job that you thought was just, I don't know, beneath them? Have you ever seen the CEO outside the parking lot picking up cigarette butts, or the company founder serving food on a holiday to the homeless? I think it's impressive, but sometimes it's almost embarrassing, right? Like shouldn't somebody else be doing that? Don't you have better things to do? You shouldn't be the one plunging toilets. You're supposed to be running the company. I'm always amazed by people who live as though there really is no task that's beneath them. I wonder if that's how Jesus' closest disciple, Peter, felt when he experienced that famous final meal with Jesus. You know the meal, the one that you've seen in paintings, the Last Supper before the crucifixion. In order to understand what I'm talking about, we're going to read the Apostle John's account of that Last Supper. But before we do, I want you to understand and see something here with me. Rather than have us read it and then me explain it, I want you to know up front what the point is. Just listen for the way that identity drives action for Jesus. Or to put it differently, watch how Jesus' self-understanding leads him to serve others. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. In other words, Jesus knew who he was, and he knew why he had come. Identity, self-understanding. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. There it is again, by the way. He knew who he was, that he was from God and returning to God. He knew that he had all the power of God, that he, as the Apostle Paul would later write, that he was in very nature God, that the Father had put all things under his power. All things. Which, if we could for a moment, let's just pause on that. Because it's going to make a huge difference given what's about to take place. Jesus has power over all things. Do you know what all things means? I mean, Jesus believed that he was God in a body, the God of the universe, the God who started it all, created it all, and was at work redeeming it all. He's the end-all, be-all over it all. I mean, we're not just talking about somebody who started a nonprofit or a business or a program and has seen it grow. We're talking about the God who started starts of every single kind. Nature, reality, plants, animals, natural disasters, the very fabric of the universe itself. Everything we know of, don't know of, and haven't even conceived of yet. Jesus believed he had power over it all. Jesus doesn't see himself as a genie granting wishes or a teacher telling you how to live. Jesus is one with the eternal God. He's the ultimate CEO of everything. Now, if you're skeptical of the Christian faith, you've perhaps thought to yourself, I think Jesus was a really good guy, taught some good stuff, but he's definitely not God. That was something that the church made up much later to give him divine status in order to use that to control people. And that line of thinking is understandable. And admittedly, the church has often misused Jesus for its own personal gain. However, Jesus himself believed and led his disciples to believe that he was God, that God had everything under his power, which means Jesus was either a liar, or he was crazy, or as the disciples would find out later after seeing him resurrected from the dead, that he was telling the truth, that he was indeed God in a body, that was Jesus' self-understanding. That was his identity. Okay, back to the story. Jesus knew who he was. So he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and he wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured some water into a basin and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now, this was a shocking sight to behold. Not to have another person wash your feet. I mean, that wasn't really the shocking part, although for us, that's pretty weird. But for the disciples, it would have been a pretty normal sight. No different than seeing a custodian with a plunger or wiping down a toilet. What made it abnormal for them, what made it shocking for them, was the person who was doing the foot washing. I mean, typically it was only Gentile servants who would be forced to wash the feet of Jewish people. Wealthy Jewish families wouldn't even let their Jewish servants do this task. I mean, it was the lowest of the low as far as tasks go. Because of that, Peter protests. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Implying he will not do this. And Jesus replied, You don't realize now what I'm doing, but later you're going to understand. No, says Peter, you should never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Peter protests for the same reason that I think any of us would protest. Jesus, this is so beneath you. I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed that you're the one who's going to clean my feet. Please, don't do it. You shouldn't have to. You should never have to put up with the dirt and grime between my toes. But, big surprise, Jesus says, look, this is symbolic. If you think the dirt and grime on your feet is your biggest problem, let me tell you, it's not. I'm going to take care of the dirt and grime on your soul. But you're not going to understand that until later. But unless I wash you now, you can't be a part of later. You can't be a part of this whole thing that I'm doing. You can't be a part of my ecclesia, because my ecclesia is going to be made up of people who I have served in this way. And then, of course, Peter took Jesus literally and enthusiastically changes his tune, right? And he's like, I want to be in. I want to be a part of it. Let's do the whole thing. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And Jesus answered. And I'd like to think he answered with a smile. Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body's clean. And you're clean. And then realizing the reality of the room, he says, though not every one of you, because he knew they were going to betray him. And that's why he said not everyone is clean. John added that, reminding us of the greater context of what's about to happen here, the betrayal of Judas and the impending crucifixion. And then Jesus wrapped up the demonstration with words that echoed the beginning, identity, empowering action. He laid out in stark clarity how your self-understanding leads to serving others. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. But now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set for you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, and nor is a messenger greater than the one who has sent him. And there it is again, from Jesus, self-understanding that leads to serving. But I think this is the magic of Jesus. It's kind of unbelievable. Jesus was God, the God of the universe, and yet he never once felt the need to play the God card. He never once demanded recognition or special treatment or for people to sing songs to him. He didn't demand people bow. He never demanded anybody clean up after him or use his godness to his own advantage. But instead, almost like completely counterintuitively, because he knew who he was, he opted not to require anything from others. I mean, being God almost in a way freed him up to serve in the lowest positions, to serve doing the most menial and borderline gross tasks. Knowing that he was above everything somehow meant nothing was beneath him. The Apostle Paul, as I said before in his letter to the Christians in Philippi, he said that Jesus, being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to use to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. And it was his death on the cross that was that ultimate act of cleansing. More than the disgusting task of washing the disciples' feet, Jesus would descend even further than that. He would undergo the most humiliating and excruciating form of torture and death that was invented in the human mind. Crucifixion. And he'd do it to pay the price for humanity's sin, to pay the price for the stains on my soul. For you, for me. When I think about that, I think Peter's response originally makes so much more sense now. Lord, are you gonna die for me? Don't do it. You shouldn't have to. It's beneath you. You shouldn't have to deal with the dirt and the grime. You shouldn't have to deal with the stench of my selfishness or my arrogance. don't do it. But Jesus' response to Peter is the same as it is to us. Unless I do this for you, you can't have any part of me. You can't be part of my movement. And here's Jesus' logic, okay? If you don't let me serve you in this way first, if you don't let the God of the universe die for you, then your identity and your self-understanding will remain as it is. And for some of you, that means that you're going to always act out of this desire to prove yourself to other people, perhaps even to God, that you're good enough. And because of that, even your good deeds are going to be laced with selfish motives to gain approval. Even your acts of service are going to be tainted by your own desire to prove that somehow you're a good person in the eyes of yourself or someone else. Or on the flip side, maybe your pride will remain intact, believing that you're just fine on your own, that you're fine as you are. And you'll only serve people so long as you see a benefit to you. And there will always be some tasks that are just beneath you. And there will always be some people who are undeserving of your serving. Unless you let Jesus serve you, your identity, your self-understanding will remain as it is. And remember, your identity drives your action. But if you let me cleanse you, says Jesus, if you let me die for you, it will change you. You'll no longer have to live trying to serve to gain the approval of other people or even your own approval. Nor will you live being blinded to your own need for forgiveness. Instead, you can receive a new identity and self-understanding that you're a person Jesus loved so much he thought you were worth dying for. I mean, that identity can lift you from the despair and desperate attempts to prove yourself. If the God of the universe was willing to be humiliated on the cross for you, then there's no greater approval that you need. And if he was willing to descend to the depths on your behalf, then there is no task that is beneath you on the behalf of others. This is why Jesus ends this very instructive moment by telling his disciples, if as your Lord and Master I was willing to stoop down and do this for you, so also now I want you to do this for others. Which is kind of astounding to me. I mean, it's counterintuitive to the way that I usually think. Now, my guess is if you're like me, maybe you think this way too, but maybe you're better than me. If I was in Jesus' position, I would have said something like, as I have done for you, also you should now do it for me. As I've done for you, you should also do for me, right? You should return the favor. You should reciprocate. Now, maybe you're better than me, but this is the life-changing principle that flows from that new identity from Jesus. What Jesus did for me becomes the motivation for what I do for others. That new identity in Jesus, that self-understanding, empowers me to serve other people without the expectation of reciprocation. To put an even stronger point on it, shortly after this incredible moment, Jesus says, a new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. As I have loved you, so also you should love other people. In fact, the best way for you to show your love for me is in the way that you show your love for others. Jesus wasn't interested in reciprocation. He wanted multiplication. Now, in this series, we've been reading a lot from the Apostle Peter because he wrote words to people who were facing a situation sort of like ours, dispersed disciples. And so it's fitting then, I think, to close this conversation today with words from Peter. He says, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. You see, the pagans that Peter is referring to accused the Christians of being atheists because they didn't have temples or physical gods that they worshipped. And because they didn't worship the pagan gods, the Christians were blamed for any time that things went wrong in the community. The assumption was that had they been worshiping properly, bad things wouldn't have happened to our community. But Peter makes it clear that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to serve everyone like Jesus. In fact, Jesus thought, as Peter repeats here, that the way people will know that you're truly a disciple of Jesus, truly a part of his ecclesia, is in the way you serve others. So even though they accuse you and blame you, you ought to serve them, do good for them. And you know what? That led to one of the greatest explosions of people embracing the Christian faith in history. I mean, if Jesus followers could be known for the good they do for others, boy, that would change things. Peter continues with the same thought. He says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to the governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and commend those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone, love for the family of God, fear of God, and honor the emperor. I love this because Peter is calling Christians to serve the very people who were the cause of their oppression. His readers would have protested, Peter, how could you possibly ask us to serve the emperor, the governor, the people and the pagans who mistreat us and beat us? And how could you ask us to respect and honor the very people who cause us so much pain? Peter, they don't deserve my service. They're beneath me. And that's where this gets really real, right? I mean, believe me, I've got some people in my life who at the thought of it, the very idea of getting on my hands and knees for them, my thought is that they don't deserve my service. It's beneath me. I'm a free person and I shouldn't have to do that. To which Peter would say to me, Corey, you are free. But you're not free to live as you see fit and do as you please. No, instead, you're free from the pride that blinds you to your own faults, leading you to believe that you are somehow better than anybody else. And you're free from the need to serve in order to gain the approval of anybody else. You're free from the humiliation that might normally come from serving people when the task is, quote, beneath you. You're free to descend to the lowest level of serving because at the end of the day, if you're a follower of Jesus, your identity isn't derived from what you do, it drives it. If you are a follower of Jesus, your identity isn't derived from what you do or who you serve. It drives it. I think Peter would say to me, Corey, if you believe that Jesus got on his hands and knees to wash the grime off of your feet, if you believe he experienced the humiliating and excruciating depth of pain to the point of death on the cross for the grime on your soul, if he was willing to do that for you, then there is no task, there is no person who is beneath you. So my friends, who is it that needs you to throw a towel around your waist and to clean the grime between their toes? What does serving look like for you? Is it a family member, a neighbor, coworker? Maybe deeper than that, who is it that you believe is beneath you, undeserving of your serving? And is it possible that you're being called to serve them as Jesus has served you? Friends, this is one of the most important habits of a healthy Jesus follower, to serve others. It's so important that Jesus actually said that it would be the thing that we were known for. So, who are you serving? Well, as always, thanks so much again for joining us. We're so glad that you did. You know, when we talk about growing as followers of Jesus, we think that happens really in a three-step process. The first step is to do exactly what you're doing right now, and that's to consume, to watch videos like this one that you're watching right now. And the second step, the step that we'd really love for you to take, is to go from consuming to communicating, to connect with us so that we can start to talk about our religious resets together, that we can be a community of people following Jesus together. And you can do that by commenting on the video and we'll respond, or you can send us an email, or you can follow us on Instagram, and we can connect in a variety of different ways. So I'd love for you to do that today, to find a way to just reach out, just say, hi, I'm here, and we can start chatting that way. The third thing to do is to contribute. And that's really where you go from watching Redeemer Online to actually living Redeemer Online, to actually putting the things we talk about here into practice in your own life. And you start to contribute to the spiritual goodness and health of your home, your family, perhaps your neighborhood or your workplace, and the communities in which you find yourself. That's our hope, that you can go from not just consuming these videos, but communicating so that we can become contributors wherever it is that we are. Now, there's going to be one more part to this conversation that we're calling habits, one more habit for us to take up, and we'll drop the end of that conversation next week. But until then, I want to send you off with God's blessing. Go with the love of your Heavenly Father, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit that binds us all together, even though we are separated all over the place. And we'll see you next time.